I'm in the kitchen today and I'm preparing Fesenjoon. It's a beautiful Persian walnut stew that's made with walnuts, pomegranate molasses, and different households cook it with different types of protein. Now, I grew up eating it with meatballs, but there are a lot of households that prepare it with chicken, and I've even seen it with duck. Now, another unique element of this recipe is the final flavor profile. Some people like it sour because they add a lot of pomegranate molasses. Some people like it sweet and they add extra sugar. We grew up eating it a bit sweet and a bit sour, so I'm gonna make sure that I have that beautiful balance of flavor in my final recipe. And of course, this is always served with some Persian rice. To start with this recipe, I've got all my ingredients prepped. Here I've got some ground walnuts. Now, it's really important to finely grind your walnuts because that impacts the final consistency of your stew. And we want the stew to be very smooth. I always start off by sauteing my vegetable. I've got finely minced onions and finely grated carrots. I'm gonna fry this for a few minutes before I add in my ground walnuts. I don't want the onions or the carrots to brown, I just need them to soften. Add in your ground walnuts and saute this for about 5 minutes before adding your liquid. I use water, but you can also use a vegetable or chicken broth. But to be honest, I think water is enough. I don't want to manipulate the authentic and beautiful flavor of the walnuts. Add in your water. And just stir the ingredients together until it has a uniform consistency. And this is pretty much all that we're gonna do for the stew till this point. The secret for the success of this stew is to allow it to cook on medium-low heat for about 3 to 4 hours. And you just need to consistently look over it and stir because you don't want any of the stew to stick on the bottom of the pot. So while my stew cooks away, I'm gonna shift this to the side and start to prepare my meatballs. Here I've got 500 grams of ground beef. Now you can use whatever kind of meat you like, but I quite like using beef for my recipe. And it's really important that it's a fatty minced beef mixture. I'd recommend about 20 to 30% fat ratio to the actual beef, simply because if it's very lean, it's gonna be very dry. To prepare my meatball mixture, I'm gonna add 1 onion finely grated with the excess liquid drained out, and I keep it on the side because I'm gonna use it to shape my meatballs. I'll just add it into the mixture. And for the seasoning, I'm just gonna use some salt, about half a teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of turmeric, a tiny pinch of cardamom powder, and finally, don't forget some saffron. And here I've got some which I finally ground, and I'll add about a pinch into the mixture. I don't usually like cooking with gloves, but because of the turmeric, I don't want to stain my hands, so I'll use them to mix everything together. And you want to make sure to knead thoroughly. You want all the ingredients to combine well because this is what's going to keep the meatball from falling apart. All right, and now I'm gonna start forming them into little meatballs. So I'm gonna shape them into about 2 centimeter diameter meatballs. I'm just gonna use some of the onion water to hold everything together nicely. Just place it in. With the meatballs shaped, I'm ready to start frying them. Because it's quite a fatty meat, I don't need to add any more oil into the frying pan, and the natural fat from the meat will start to melt and it will help brown the meatballs. I'm just gonna quickly check on my stew, and you'll see it has this beautiful layer of fat. Now this is part of what makes this dish really special, because that layer of fat is actually the fat that's coming from the walnuts, and that's where this flavor development starts to happen. You'll notice that I haven't covered the pot when preparing the stew, and it's simply because I don't want the condensed air that comes from the stew to go back in. I cook it with the lid off, and I let the excess liquid evaporate and the stew to slowly reduce and for the color to develop into a nice dark brown color. My meatballs are ready. They have a beautiful brown color, and I'll just turn off the heat and reserve these on the side, and they will be ready to add into my stew when I need them later. And my stew is simmering away beautifully. I've got that lovely layer of fat from the walnuts just coming to the surface. And I'm gonna let this simmer away for at least another hour to 2 hours. It's been nearly 2 hours since my stew has been simmering away, and it has reduced significantly. At this point, I'm ready to add my pomegranate molasses, and this is what's going to give it that beautiful depth of flavor. And you'll see that it slowly starts to change into a dark and rich, deep color. And to balance the sour flavor, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar, about 1 to 2 tablespoons. And to be honest, the amount really depends on how you like the stew to taste. So if you want it more sour, you add less sugar, and if you want it more sweet, you add more sugar. I'll add in my meatballs, and I'm gonna let this simmer for at least 30 minutes on very, very low heat. And this is what's gonna help allow that oil layer to come to the surface. If you find that you don't have it, that usually means that the temperature of your heat is really high, and what's happening is that bubble effect is emulsifying the oil into the sauce. But if you want that oil to kind of layer up on the top, make sure that the heat is very, very low. And you see it's starting to form. My Fesenjoon has been simmering away now for about 4 hours. The excess liquid has reduced. It has developed a beautiful dark, rich brown color. Now this comes both from the slow cooking of the walnuts and because of the pomegranate molasses that we added to give this to a rich and beautiful flavor. And now we're ready to serve. And I'm just gonna serve this in a beautiful serving bowl. It has a nice consistency. It's not too thick, but also not too thin. And I'll garnish with some parsley and with some pomegranate seeds. And that's it. My Fesenjoon recipe is ready. This is truly a very special recipe that is loved in our household. It takes a bit of time and needs a lot of love and attention, but promise it is well worth the effort. Serve this with some Persian rice on the side, and it's a perfect and complete meal. And a quick tip, make this the night before and serve the next day, and the flavors are even going to develop further. Persian cooking is always better when it's a day old. Hope you guys like this recipe. Do try it at home. See you guys later.